The Coast Guard rescue swimmers thought they knew everything about their most beautiful colleague when Hurricane Diana struck with Category 5 fury and revealed a secret that would change everything. The stunning blonde swimmer they'd been working alongside for months had just executed the most impossible water rescue in Coast Guard history, saving 30 lives using skills that didn't exist in any manual. What they discovered was that Petty Officer Sarah Storm Mitchell wasn't just another rescue swimmer, she was a former Navy SEAL whose classified past had been carefully hidden until the moment when 30 civilians trapped in churning hurricane waters needed someone willing to die to save them. Welcome to Silent Hero Stories. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world are you watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. Now, let me tell you the secret that Sarah had been hiding. The United States Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer Program represented one of the most physically demanding specialties in the American military, creating warriors who could leap from helicopters into churning seas to save lives that conventional rescue methods couldn't reach. These weren't ordinary swimmers, they were aquatic athletes capable of operating in conditions that would kill ordinary people, trained to save lives in waters so dangerous that most humans wouldn't survive even with life jackets. Coast Guard Air Station Miami housed some of the most elite rescue swimmers in the service, specialists who had proven themselves in conditions ranging from Caribbean hurricanes to North Atlantic winter storms. These men and women could swim through 20-foot swells, dive to depths that would crush untrained divers, and carry unconscious victims through water conditions that challenged the limits of human endurance. The rescue swimmers stationed at Miami had seen everything the ocean could throw at human beings: cruise ship disasters, fishing vessel sinkings, aircraft crashes in open water, and hurricane evacuations that required swimming through conditions that defied survival. They had pulled bodies from waters so violent that helicopters could barely maintain hover, and they had saved lives in situations where single mistakes meant death not just for victims but for the rescue swimmers themselves. Which made the presence of Petty Officer First Class Sarah Mitchell both fascinating and mysterious to her colleagues. Not because she lacked qualifications, her rescue swimmer credentials were impeccable, but because someone so strikingly beautiful seemed to have capabilities that exceeded what her appearance suggested possible. At 24 years old, Sarah possessed the kind of ethereal beauty that belonged in fashion magazines rather than Coast Guard rescue operations. With platinum blonde hair that seemed to glow even when wet, piercing blue eyes that reflected the ocean's depth, and features so perfectly sculpted they appeared almost supernatural, she looked like a mermaid who had decided to join the military rather than a warrior trained to save lives in humanity's most hostile environment. But what made Sarah truly mysterious wasn't her beauty, it was her capabilities. During training exercises and actual rescue operations, she demonstrated swimming abilities that exceeded what Coast Guard training produced. Her speed through heavy seas was remarkable, her endurance in cold water was unprecedented, and her ability to handle victims in conditions that challenged experienced rescue swimmers suggested skills that came from somewhere beyond conventional Coast Guard preparation. Senior Chief Petty Officer Chief Morrison, the station's most experienced rescue swimmer with over 300 successful rescues across 12 years of service, had been quietly observing Sarah since her assignment 6 months earlier. What he saw challenged everything he understood about Coast Guard training and human swimming capabilities. "There's something about Mitchell that doesn't add up," Morrison had confided to his swim partner during a routine training session. "Her technique is perfect, but it's not Coast Guard perfect, it's something else. She moves through water like she was born in it, and she handles rescue scenarios like she's done things we've never even trained for." Morrison's observations were shared by others in the unit, though none could articulate exactly what seemed different about Sarah's approach to rescue swimming. Her official record showed standard Coast Guard training progression: basic military training, rescue swimmer school, advanced water survival, and specialized rescue techniques. But her performance suggested experience that exceeded what those programs provided. Petty Officer Shark Rodriguez, the station's second most experienced rescue swimmer, had been more direct in expressing his curiosity about Sarah's background. "I've been doing this for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone swim like Mitchell. She handles heavy seas like they're calm water, and she's comfortable at depths that make me nervous. Where did she learn to swim like that?" The question reflected growing curiosity throughout the unit about Sarah's capabilities and background. She performed rescue operations with confidence that suggested extensive experience, but her personnel file showed only standard Coast Guard service. She demonstrated technical knowledge about water rescue that exceeded what Coast Guard schools taught, but she never explained where that knowledge had been acquired. Sarah's response to questions about her swimming background was professionally appropriate but revealing little. "I spent a lot of time in the water before joining the Coast Guard. Swimming has always been natural for me. The answers were truthful but incomplete, providing information without revealing the extraordinary circumstances that had shaped her aquatic capabilities. What her colleagues didn't know, what couldn't be revealed without violating classification levels that exceeded Coast Guard security clearance, was that Sarah's time in the water had included 6 years as a Navy SEAL, serving in maritime special operations that pushed human swimming capabilities beyond what conventional military training provided. Sarah's path to the Coast Guard had begun not with civilian recruitment but with military transition following completion of classified assignments that had tested every aspect of her specialized training. Her SEAL service had included underwater infiltration missions, maritime counterterrorism operations, and aquatic survival scenarios that exceeded anything Coast Guard rescue swimmers would ever encounter. But her most significant SEAL achievement had been development of advanced swimming techniques for operating in extreme conditions that conventional military training couldn't prepare personnel to survive. Working with specialized equipment and tactical approaches that remained classified, she had created methods for maritime operations that pushed human aquatic capabilities beyond normal physiological limits. Her transition to Coast Guard service hadn't been career change but career continuation, applying specialized skills to humanitarian missions rather than combat operations. The rescue swimmer program provided perfect cover for capabilities that couldn't be explained through conventional training, while allowing her to use her extraordinary skills for saving lives rather than taking them. But Sarah's most carefully guarded secret wasn't her SEAL background, it was the reason she had left special operations for Coast Guard service. During her final SEAL mission, a maritime rescue operation had required her to choose between mission completion and saving civilian lives. Her decision to prioritize rescue over operational objectives had ended her special operations career but had revealed her true calling as someone whose skills were meant for preservation rather than destruction. The classified nature of her background meant that her Coast Guard colleagues could observe her exceptional capabilities but couldn't understand their origin. She appeared to be naturally gifted rather than specially trained, lucky rather than skilled, beautiful rather than deadly. This misunderstanding would prove nearly catastrophic when Hurricane Diana tested not just her abilities but her willingness to reveal secrets that could save lives at the cost of personal exposure. The first indication that Sarah's hidden background might become relevant came during a routine rescue training exercise that quickly became anything but routine when weather conditions deteriorated beyond what normal Coast Guard operations could handle safely. The exercise had been designed to test rescue swimmer capabilities in moderately rough seas, with simulated victims requiring evacuation from disabled vessels in conditions that challenged but didn't exceed normal rescue parameters. But ocean conditions had worsened throughout the day, creating swells and wind patterns that pushed the exercise beyond training parameters into actual operational challenges. Control, this is Rescue 6. Weather conditions have exceeded exercise parameters. Recommend termination of training operations, came the radio call from the helicopter crew chief as wind and wave conditions reached levels that made rescue operations genuinely dangerous rather than merely challenging. Senior Chief Morrison's response reflected standard Coast Guard safety protocols. Roger, Rescue 6. Terminate exercise and return to base. Weather conditions are beyond safe training parameters. But Sarah had been observing the ocean conditions with eyes trained by years of maritime operations in far more challenging environments. What appeared dangerous to Coast Guard standards was merely difficult by SEAL operational parameters, and she recognized that terminating the exercise would miss valuable training opportunities in conditions that rescue swimmers might encounter during actual emergencies. Senior Chief, request permission to continue exercise operations. Current conditions provide valuable training opportunities for heavy weather rescue scenarios, Sarah called, proposing to continue operations that conventional wisdom considered too dangerous for training purposes. Morrison's response revealed his concern about safety margins that Coast Guard doctrine required. Mitchell, weather conditions have exceeded safe training parameters. We don't conduct training operations in conditions this dangerous. Senior Chief, these conditions are challenging but manageable with proper technique. I can demonstrate rescue procedures that would be effective in these sea states, Sarah replied, offering to show capabilities that she knew exceeded standard Coast Guard training but could be executed safely by someone with her background. Morrison faced a decision that reflected fundamental questions about training philosophy and operational safety. Sarah was proposing to demonstrate rescue techniques in conditions that Coast Guard doctrine considered dangerous, but her confidence suggested capabilities that might be worth observing even if they exceeded standard parameters. Mitchell, if you're willing to demonstrate advanced techniques, I'll observe from safety position. But we terminate immediately if conditions worsen or if anything goes wrong, Morrison decided, allowing Sarah to show capabilities that had been hidden since her assignment to the unit. What followed would become legendary in Coast Guard rescue swimmer training, not just for the techniques Sarah demonstrated but for the way she revealed capabilities that redefined what was possible in heavy weather rescue operations. Working in sea conditions that would have challenged experienced rescue swimmers, Sarah began demonstrating swimming and rescue techniques that exceeded anything her colleagues had ever witnessed. Her movement through heavy seas appeared almost effortless, as if the violent ocean conditions were calm water rather than the dangerous environment that had forced termination of normal training operations. Her rescue techniques were unlike anything taught in Coast Guard schools, incorporating methods that allowed her to maintain control of victims while swimming through conditions that would have overwhelmed conventional approaches. She moved with precision that suggested muscle memory developed through years of practice in far more challenging conditions than Coast Guard training provided. "Holy shit, how is she doing that?" Rodriguez whispered as he watched Sarah complete rescue procedures that seemed impossible given the sea conditions. "She's swimming through those swells like they don't exist." Morrison found himself observing rescue techniques that challenged his understanding of human capabilities in marine environments. Sarah wasn't just successfully operating in dangerous conditions, she was demonstrating mastery that suggested training and experience far beyond what Coast Guard programs provided. Her performance continued for over an hour as she demonstrated advanced rescue swimming in conditions that pushed beyond safety parameters, showing techniques that could save lives in situations where conventional Coast Guard methods would fail. Her capabilities were extraordinary, but they raised questions about background and training that her personnel file didn't answer. The training demonstration ended when Sarah completed a series of rescue scenarios that had been impossible under the prevailing conditions, proving that human capabilities in marine environments could exceed what conventional training suggested. But her performance had revealed skills that demanded explanation. "Mitchell, where did you learn to swim like that?" Morrison asked directly as they returned to base. "What you demonstrated today exceeds anything I've seen in 12 years of Coast Guard rescue swimming. That level of capability doesn't come from standard training." Sarah's response was carefully measured, providing truth without revealing classified information. "I had extensive swimming experience before joining the Coast Guard, Senior Chief. I've always been comfortable in challenging water conditions." Her answer was accurate but incomplete, revealing capability without explaining origin. Morrison recognized evasion that suggested classified background, but he also recognized skills that could prove invaluable if circumstances required rescue operations beyond normal Coast Guard parameters. What Morrison couldn't have anticipated was that circumstances requiring exactly those capabilities would arise far sooner than expected, when Hurricane Diana developed into a Category 5 monster that would test not just Sarah's skills but her willingness to reveal secrets that could save lives at the cost of personal exposure. Hurricane Diana had been tracking across the Atlantic for 10 days, steadily intensifying as it moved toward the Florida coast with a trajectory that placed Miami directly in its path. Weather forecasts indicated that Diana would make landfall as a Category 4 hurricane, creating storm conditions that would challenge every aspect of Coast Guard rescue capabilities. But Diana's intensity continued increasing even as it approached the coast, with sustained winds reaching 180 miles per hour and storm surge predictions that exceeded anything in recorded history. What had been forecast as a severe but manageable hurricane had become a Category 5 monster that threatened unprecedented destruction along the entire South Florida coastline. Coast Guard Air Station Miami had been placed on maximum alert as Diana approached, with all rescue assets prepared for post-storm operations that would likely include the largest rescue effort in Coast Guard history. But intelligence reports indicated that Diana's unprecedented intensity might create rescue scenarios that exceeded standard Coast Guard capabilities. "All personnel," announced Captain Patricia Hayes, the air station commander, "Hurricane Diana represents the most severe storm threat in recorded history for this region. Sustained winds of 180 miles per hour with storm surge exceeding 30 feet means we'll be facing rescue scenarios that push beyond normal operational parameters." The briefing revealed the scope of the challenge facing Coast Guard rescue operations: unprecedented storm intensity, massive storm surge, and potential for rescue scenarios in conditions that exceeded what standard training had prepared them to handle. "We have reports of multiple vessels that failed to reach safe harbor before Diana's arrival, including a cruise ship with over 2,000 passengers that lost power and is drifting toward shallow water where grounding appears inevitable," Hayes continued. "We may be facing rescue operations in conditions that challenge everything we've trained for." The briefing included information that revealed the specific challenges Sarah's hidden capabilities would prove essential to address: maritime rescues in hurricane conditions that exceeded normal Coast Guard operational parameters, requiring skills and techniques that pushed beyond conventional training. Senior Chief Morrison understood that the rescue operations they were facing would test every aspect of their training and capabilities, potentially requiring techniques and risk acceptance that exceeded normal Coast Guard doctrine. Looking at Sarah, he recognized that her mysterious skills might prove essential for missions that conventional training couldn't prepare them to accomplish. "Mitchell, I want you on primary rescue team for hurricane operations. Whatever background gave you those swimming capabilities, we're going to need them," Morrison assigned, recognizing that extraordinary circumstances required extraordinary capabilities regardless of their origin. Sarah acknowledged the assignment while privately understanding that Hurricane Diana would likely require her to reveal SEAL capabilities that had been carefully hidden throughout her Coast Guard service. The choice would be between maintaining operational security and saving lives that couldn't be rescued using conventional methods. The first test of Sarah's hidden capabilities came when Diana made landfall with intensity that exceeded all forecasts, generating storm surge and wind conditions that created the most challenging rescue environment in Coast Guard history. Diana's landfall brought sustained winds of 185 miles per hour with gusts exceeding 200, creating storm surge that reached 40 feet in some areas and generating wave conditions that made conventional rescue operations impossible. The hurricane had exceeded Category 5 parameters, creating what meteorologists were calling the strongest storm in recorded Atlantic history. "All stations, this is Coast Guard Sector Miami. We have multiple vessels in distress with hundreds of lives at risk. Storm conditions exceed all operational parameters, but we have American citizens who will die without immediate rescue operations," came the emergency broadcast that activated the largest Coast Guard rescue effort in service history. The radio call included information about specific rescue scenarios that would test Sarah's capabilities. The cruise ship Majestic Princess with 2,100 passengers and crew grounded on a reef and taking on water, multiple fishing vessels with crews trapped in rapidly sinking boats, and dozens of pleasure craft with civilians who had been unable to reach safe harbor before Diana's arrival. Morrison's response reflected the gravity of facing rescue operations in conditions that exceeded what conventional training had prepared them to handle. "Roger, Sector. Launching all available rescue assets. Will attempt rescue operations despite weather conditions exceeding normal operational parameters." But Morrison understood that the rescue missions they were facing would require capabilities that pushed beyond standard Coast Guard training. Looking at Sarah, he made a decision that would reveal her hidden background. "Mitchell, you're primary rescue swimmer for the cruise ship operation. I don't know what your background is, but we need every skill you have." The assignment was both recognition of Sarah's exceptional capabilities and acknowledgement that conventional rescue methods might not be adequate for the conditions they were facing. Morrison was essentially authorizing her to use whatever skills she possessed, regardless of their origin. Sarah understood that the cruise ship rescue would require her to reveal SEAL capabilities that had been classified since her transition to Coast Guard service. But with over 2,000 lives at risk, operational security became secondary to humanitarian necessity. "Roger, Senior Chief. I'll use whatever techniques are necessary to save those lives," Sarah replied, accepting assignment to a mission that would expose her true background while potentially saving more lives than any single rescue operation in Coast Guard history. The helicopter flight to the Majestic Princess revealed the full extent of the challenge facing the rescue operation. Hurricane Diana had pushed the massive cruise ship onto a coral reef 3 miles from shore, where it was being pounded by waves that exceeded 50 feet while taking on water that threatened to sink the vessel with all hands. "Rescue 1, this is the Majestic Princess. We have catastrophic hull damage and are taking on water rapidly. Estimate complete flooding within 4 hours. We need immediate evacuation of 2,100 souls," came the desperate radio call from the cruise ship's bridge as the vessel listed heavily to starboard while being battered by hurricane-force waves. The radio call revealed the scope of the rescue challenge: over 2,000 people requiring evacuation from a sinking ship in hurricane conditions that made conventional rescue operations impossible. The Majestic Princess was too large for helicopter evacuation of all passengers, too damaged for towing, and in water too rough for normal rescue swimmer operations. Morrison's assessment of the tactical situation confirmed the unprecedented nature of the rescue challenge they were facing. "Control, this is Rescue 1. The Princess is breaking up on the reef with massive wave action that exceeds safe rescue parameters. Conventional rescue operations are not possible in these conditions." Sarah observed the rescue scenario with eyes trained by years of maritime operations in conditions that exceeded Coast Guard parameters. What appeared impossible to conventional rescue doctrine was challenging but achievable using SEAL techniques that had been developed for exactly these kinds of extreme maritime scenarios. "Senior Chief, request permission to attempt rescue operations using advanced maritime techniques." "I can access the vessel and establish evacuation procedures despite current sea conditions," Sarah called, proposing to use capabilities that would reveal her true background but could save lives that conventional methods couldn't reach. Morrison faced the decision that would change everything: authorize Sarah to use unknown capabilities that might violate regulations, or accept that over 2,000 people would die because conventional rescue methods were inadequate for the conditions Diana had created. "Mitchell, you have authorization to use any techniques necessary to save those lives. I don't care what manual they're not in, if you can get to that ship, do it," Morrison replied, essentially giving Sarah permission to reveal SEAL capabilities that had been hidden throughout her Coast Guard service. What followed became legendary not just in Coast Guard history but throughout maritime rescue operations worldwide, as Sarah demonstrated capabilities that redefined what was possible in extreme maritime conditions while revealing the secret she had hidden since joining the Coast Guard. Entering water conditions that would have been fatal for conventionally trained rescue swimmers, Sarah began demonstrating aquatic capabilities that exceeded human physiological limits while revealing techniques that had been developed in the most classified maritime operations programs in military history. Her entry into the churning hurricane waters appeared almost supernatural as she maintained swimming capability in conditions that challenged helicopter operations, moving through 50-foot swells with precision that suggested years of training in far more challenging environments than Coast Guard programs provided. "How is she maintaining position in those seas?" Rodriguez called from the helicopter as he watched Sarah swim toward the cruise ship through conditions that would have killed conventional rescue swimmers within minutes. "I don't know, but document everything she does," Morrison replied, recognizing that he was witnessing rescue techniques that would revolutionize Coast Guard training while revealing capabilities that suggested military background far beyond what Sarah's personnel file indicated. Sarah's approach to the Majestic Princess required swimming techniques that exceeded normal human capabilities in marine environments, using methods that had been developed for SEAL operations in conditions that conventional military training couldn't prepare personnel to survive. Reaching the cruise ship through hurricane waters that were destroying the massive vessel, Sarah began implementing rescue procedures that combined SEAL infiltration techniques with Coast Guard humanitarian protocols, creating approaches to mass casualty evacuation that had never been attempted in maritime rescue operations. "Princess, this is Coast Guard rescue swimmer. I'm establishing evacuation procedures that will allow systematic passenger removal despite current sea conditions. Prepare passengers for unconventional evacuation methods," Sarah called as she reached the vessel using swimming capabilities that challenged understanding of human aquatic performance. Her plan for evacuating over 2,000 passengers from a sinking cruise ship in Category 5 hurricane conditions required innovative approaches that combined military special operations techniques with humanitarian rescue priorities, creating evacuation procedures that pushed beyond anything in Coast Guard doctrine. Working with ship's crew who were amazed by her ability to reach them through conditions that had made conventional rescue impossible, Sarah began implementing evacuation procedures that utilized every aspect of her SEAL training while adapting those techniques for civilian rescue rather than military operations. The evacuation she coordinated required passengers to enter water conditions that would normally be fatal, but using techniques that Sarah had developed during classified operations to survive in maritime environments that exceeded normal human capabilities. Her methods allowed civilians to survive in hurricane waters while being transferred to rescue aircraft. "Control, this is Mitchell. Beginning passenger evacuation using advanced water survival techniques. Estimate successful removal of all passengers despite weather conditions," Sarah called as she began the most complex maritime rescue operation in Coast Guard history. Her radio call was professionally accurate but understated the extent of what she was attempting, evacuating over 2,000 civilians from a sinking cruise ship in Category 5 hurricane conditions using techniques that had never been attempted in humanitarian rescue operations. The evacuation continued for 8 hours as Sarah coordinated passenger transfer from the doomed cruise ship to rescue helicopters, using SEAL techniques adapted for civilian rescue while maintaining operational security about methods that remained classified despite their humanitarian application. Her performance during the rescue operation was witnessed by Coast Guard personnel throughout the theater, who observed rescue swimming capabilities that exceeded anything in their experience while recognizing technical approaches that suggested military training far beyond what Coast Guard programs provided. Sector Miami, this is Rescue 1. All 2,100 passengers and crew successfully evacuated from the Majestic Princess. 0 casualties during evacuation operations despite Category 5 conditions, Morrison reported as the rescue operation concluded with unprecedented success. The radio call announced successful completion of the largest single maritime rescue in Coast Guard history, accomplished using techniques that would be studied and incorporated into advanced rescue training programs while raising questions about capabilities that exceeded conventional explanation. But Sarah's revelation of SEAL capabilities during the cruise ship rescue was just the beginning of Hurricane Diana operations that would require her to fully expose her classified background while coordinating rescue efforts that saved dozens of additional lives using techniques that conventional Coast Guard training couldn't provide. The success of the Majestic Princess evacuation had established Sarah as the primary rescue swimmer for Diana operations that continued to exceed normal Coast Guard capabilities, requiring her to demonstrate increasingly advanced techniques while revealing the extent of her specialized training. Over the following 2 days, Sarah participated in rescue operations that saved an additional 28 lives from various maritime disasters that Hurricane Diana had created throughout South Florida waters. Each rescue required techniques that pushed beyond Coast Guard doctrine while revealing capabilities that could only have been acquired through the most advanced military training programs. Her rescues included 8 commercial fishermen from 3 different vessels that had been overwhelmed by Diana's storm surge, 12 recreational boaters who had been trapped when their marina was destroyed by hurricane force winds, and 8 Coast Guard personnel whose rescue helicopter had been forced down by conditions that exceeded aircraft operational parameters. Each rescue operation required Sarah to demonstrate advanced maritime capabilities while revealing aspects of her SEAL background that had been classified throughout her Coast Guard service. Her techniques were observed and documented by Coast Guard personnel who recognized skills that exceeded conventional training while understanding that her capabilities were saving lives that couldn't be reached through standard rescue methods. The post-hurricane debriefing became legendary in Coast Guard history as Sarah was finally required to explain capabilities that had been hidden since her assignment to the unit, revealing SEAL background that transformed understanding of her mysterious skills while establishing new approaches to advanced rescue training. Petty Officer Mitchell, Captain Hayes began during the formal debriefing. Your performance during Hurricane Diana operations has been exceptional, but it's clear that your capabilities exceed what Coast Guard training provides. Can you explain the background that made these rescue techniques possible? Sarah's answer revealed the secret she had protected throughout her Coast Guard service. Ma'am, I served 6 years as a Navy SEAL before transitioning to Coast Guard rescue operations. My maritime training included specialized techniques for operating in extreme conditions that proved applicable to hurricane rescue scenarios. Her revelation transformed understanding of everything her colleagues had observed since her assignment to the unit, explaining capabilities that had seemed mysteriously exceptional while revealing the classified military background that had prepared her for rescue operations beyond Coast Guard parameters. Senior Chief Morrison's response reflected complete reorientation of his understanding about Sarah's qualifications and the reason for her assignment to their unit. That explains everything I've been observing for 6 months. You're not just a rescue swimmer, you're a special operations maritime specialist whose skills exceed anything our training provides. Sarah's SEAL background had been carefully concealed to maintain operational security, but Hurricane Diana had required her to reveal capabilities that could save lives while exposing the classified training that had prepared her for exactly the kinds of extreme maritime operations that the hurricane had demanded. 6 months later, Petty Officer First Class Sarah Storm Mitchell was promoted to Chief Petty Officer and assigned to develop advanced rescue training programs that would prepare Coast Guard rescue swimmers for extreme conditions that conventional training couldn't address. Her innovations in maritime rescue techniques, developed through SEAL operations and proven during Hurricane Diana, became standard elements of advanced Coast Guard training while establishing new approaches to rescue operations in conditions that had previously been considered impossible. Sarah's story became required study in Coast Guard leadership programs, demonstrating how specialized military backgrounds could enhance humanitarian operations while proving that the most effective rescue techniques often came from training programs that pushed beyond conventional parameters. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah's success established that maritime rescue capabilities could exceed what conventional training suggested possible, ensuring that future generations of Coast Guard rescue swimmers would be prepared for extreme conditions that tested the limits of human performance in marine environments. The stunning blonde swimmer who had hidden her SEAL background had reminded everyone that true rescue effectiveness comes not from conventional training but from possessing capabilities developed through the most demanding military programs, applied to humanitarian missions that saved lives others couldn't reach. What they didn't know about Chief Petty Officer Sarah Storm Mitchell could have filled multiple classified training manuals, but what everyone learned was that some rescue swimmers earn their reputations not through conventional Coast Guard training but through specialized military capabilities that redefine what's possible when human lives depend on skills that exceed normal parameters.